Bulking, should you do it or is it a waste of time? Firstly, let's define what bulking is. Bulking is when one eats in a calorie surplus in order to gain weight, more specifically gain muscle. So there are two methods of bulking. You may have heard of the dirty bulk and the clean/lean bulk. The dirty bulking is when somebody eats in a calorie surplus of 500 calories or more, and the clean/lean bulk is when somebody eats in a calorie surplus of between 200 to 300 calories. So when someone is dirty bulking, eating in a 500 calorie surplus, they will gain 1 pound of body weight per week. So over a year, that is 52 pounds of body weight gained in a year.
2 + 2 is 4, -1, that's 3, quick maths.
And somebody that is doing a lean bulk will gain half of that. They'll gain half a pound a week, and in a year they'll gain 26 pounds for the year. Now, let me refer you to this graph which shows how much muscle somebody that's trained naturally can expect to gain. So as you can see from the graph, as you gain more experience within training, it becomes harder to gain muscle. The first year, supposedly, you could gain 20 to 25 pounds of muscle in the first year, which I actually think is on the higher end. And if you're gaining that kind of muscle in your first year, I think you've got like very good genetics. I think people with average genetics can't gain as much as this. But the main reason I am showing you this graph is just so that you have a realistic expectation of how much muscle you can gain naturally, and also to put in perspective of when people are dirty bulking, gaining like 50 pounds in a year, that isn't going to be muscle. The majority of that is going to be body fat. So clearly the main problem with dirty bulking is that you're going to gain too much body fat. So after somebody's finished their dirty bulking, they will then have to get rid of the fat and go into a cutting phase. And the problem with going to a cutting phase, you're at more risk of losing muscle mass. Obviously there's ways you can minimize the chances of losing muscle, but when you're in an energy deficit in comparison to maintenance or a slight surplus, you're definitely at more risk of losing muscle. Other problems that dirty bulking causes is that when you gain body fat, your body is actually less efficient at building muscle, because your body then builds up a higher insulin resistance. Also, when you're eating like so many calories, you can potentially feel more tired. You think that when you're giving your body more food, more energy, that you'll feel more energetic, and that isn't the case. There becomes a point where it actually makes you feel more tired, more lethargic. Because of the extreme yo-yo dieting as well, from eating a lot of food and then eating quite little food, because that can potentially cause eating disorders. Another thing to mention when you're dirty bulking and you've gained excessive amounts of body fat is that when you've gained more body fat, you have then increased the amount of fat cells in your body. And the thing with fat cells is you can't actually get rid of them. So when you're increasing your fat cells within your body, it becomes more likely that when you're in a calorie surplus, that your body will then convert that energy into more body fat rather than building muscle. And also when you're in a fat loss phase, when you've got more fat cells, it becomes harder to lose body fat. Now let's talk about lean bulking. So if you are going to choose the option of bulking, I'd much prefer people to choose the lean bulking option rather than the dirty bulking. So all the things we just mentioned about the problems you could run into, you are less likely to run into them because you're gaining weight at a slower rate. Because you're leaner, you're going to be more sensitive to food, more sensitive to insulin. It's going to help build muscle. You're going to develop less fat cells, and you're going to spend less time yo-yo dieting. You're not going to spend as much time cutting after your bulking phase because you've got less fat to lose. So this seems like the best option, and between the two it definitely is. But this is leading on to my next point of why I'm personally not going to probably ever do any kind of bulking again. So I'm approaching the 4-year mark of training. So referring back to the graph, I'm not going to be able to gain 10, 20 pounds of muscle a year. It's probably going to be around 2 pounds of muscle per year. So being in a calorie surplus, gaining say 15, 20 pounds a year, which is considered a lean bulk, and say only a quarter of that is going to be muscle, for me, it just doesn't seem worth it. Trading off aesthetics, being lean, feeling good. Like my primary goal is to be somewhat strong and mainly just look aesthetic. So trading that off for an extra maybe pound gained of muscle in a year and then having to waste more time cutting, for me personally, my own personal goals, it's not worth it. I think it's different if you're a bodybuilder and you've got like an off season where you've got like a strict time frame of you've got to try and maximize how much muscle you can build, then that's a little bit different. But for me, just an average guy trying to look aesthetic, the only thing I'm prepping for is probably a beach on Ibiza and not a bodybuilding show. So I'd rather eat at maintenance. Like, you don't need a calorie surplus to build muscle. It just makes building muscle easier. But for the trade-offs I've mentioned, I don't think it's worth it. Like eating at maintenance, I might gain say 1 pound of muscle less in a year in comparison if I was in a surplus. but then I don't have to go through cutting phases. So that's why I think bulking for me is a waste of time. Yes, I could probably get stronger by being in a calorie surplus and gaining body weight, but because you gain body weight and you get stronger, like there's a big correlation between body weight and your strength. Like if you got stronger at the bench press and you've gained 30 pounds, like it doesn't necessarily mean you've gained muscle. When you've gained more body fat around the joints, you can have more stability. Like when your chest is obviously higher up, the bar hasn't got to come down as far, so your range of motion is decreased. So people may think that they've gained a lot of strength on the bench press, but it might not be due to the fact you've gained muscle. Anyway, that's why I'm not bulking anymore. If you want to bulk, you can do that. I think that bulking is going to be more beneficial for people that are new to training because they've got more capability of building muscle. So for the first year, maybe two, a lean bulk I think is a good idea. But one thing I do want to advise if you are going to bulk, and that is make sure you're lean prior to bulking, because obviously if you start a bulk when you're not lean and you're gaining muscle and body fat, obviously you're going to end up looking like a marshmallow. So yeah, don't start bulking when, say, you are, say, above 20% body fat. That is not ideal. And another thing that people get tied up with when they're bulking is they get like attached to the number on the scales. Like if their body weight isn't increasing, they think that they're not gaining muscle. Whereas I think the main numbers you should focus on is your numbers in your logbook in the gym. If your lifts are going up, then that is the main thing you should be concerned about. Like if you're progressively overloading your training, there's a good chance of you gaining muscle. So don't be in a rush to keep trying to gain weight, because as I mentioned, the more weight you gain isn't necessarily going to be more muscle. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up there. Please let me know your thoughts about bulking and whether you think bulking is worth it in the comments. I'll be very interested to know a lot of your thoughts. But yeah, hopefully I've gave you a better understanding of what bulking is and whether you should or shouldn't do it depending on your level of experience of training. But yeah, anyway, wrapping things up there. Hope you enjoyed it. Like this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Please do that. That would be really good. Yeah, see you later.